The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
It's coming.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you. It's haunting me. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me. All these whispers.
My name is James Hershey. Right back.
All these shadows in my mind. With my reflection, I can't find. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a
That ought to
ghost
do
of
it.
you and me. Of you and me. Don't let 'em take you away. Don't let 'em bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let 'em bring you down.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I'm your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me, as always, my co-host, Old Boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How's all my misfits doing tonight?
Tonight's show is going to be a good one. This is going to be another one of our research shows, and it's going to be fantastic. On Staring into the Abyss, we talk about all kinds of monsters and things that go bump in the night. From vampires and werewolves to unicorns and mermaids. These are the creatures that fuel your nightmares and that populate mythologies all over the world. But what if I was to tell you that these things exist? Now, you would probably think that I was crazy, right? But what if I could prove to you that they existed? What would your logical next question be? Well, I would imagine that if you were faced with such a truth, your first question might be, where did all these creatures come from? And why are they so hard to find? Well, that was my question as well. When I started realizing that a lot of these creatures absolutely do exist, I wanted to know where they came from. I wanted to know why it's so difficult to find them. I have done hundreds of hours of research to find the answers to those questions. This has been a journey that I've been on for a long time, and I'm going to share those answers with you tonight. Tonight's episode is going to be one hell of a ride, and I'm going to explain basically the origin of monsters. This whole story begins with some angels that became infatuated with human women and wanted them for their own. Genesis chapter 6, verse 1, "And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown." So sons of God in the Old Testament always refers to angels. There were giants before and after the flood. For the angels to have borne children with women, they had to have had a flesh and blood body, which meant that they had to have left their first estate and drank human blood, because blood is life. That is how you leave your first estate as an angelic being, is to consume human blood to take the form of a human. Angels took on a body, and they mated with human women and produced an offspring. That offspring was a race of giants. The Bible says these giants had 6 fingers and 6 toes, and there have actually been many giant skeletons found in real life in history, which had 6 fingers and 6 toes. The largest on record, according to the Smithsonian, was 36 feet tall. Okay, so this proves the existence of giants, and it explains where they came from. Angels are spiritual beings and cannot produce offspring with human women in that form, in the spiritual form. So they had to take on a human-like body to be capable of being with a woman in that way. Now you might ask yourself, how did the angels do that? The answer to that question is that the angels had to leave their first estate. That's what I was talking about a minute ago. Jude chapter 1 verse 6, and the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. When an angel leaves its first estate, it means that they no longer want to be a spiritual being, but instead they want to become flesh and blood. The way an angel becomes flesh and blood is by drinking the blood of humans. Leviticus 17 verse 11 through 14. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul. Therefore I said unto the children of Israel, no soul of you shall eat the blood, neither shall any stranger that sojourneth among you eat blood. And whatsoever man there be of children of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among you, which hunteth and catcheth any beast or fowl that may be eaten, he shall even pour out the blood thereof, and cover it with dust. For it is the life of all flesh. The blood of it is for the life thereof. Therefore I said unto the children of Israel, ye shall eat the blood of no manner of flesh, for the life of all flesh is the blood thereof. Whosoever eateth it shall be cut off. For fallen angels to fall and take on a flesh and blood body, they would have to drink blood and continue to drink blood to stay alive. Okay, these were the first vampires. This is the origin of the vampire. So here we have biblical proof of not only the existence of vampires, but their origins. So the first vampires were these fallen angels, which wanted to make love to human women. So they had to drink human blood in order to leave their first estate and obtain a body that was capable of doing so. In Greek mythology, the gods came down with mankind. Who would those gods have been? Could they have been the fallen angels, which mated with human women? The Greek gods were always having sex with humans, and there are stories of giants, and the Greek gods always demanded blood sacrifice. All the old gods of various religions, the majority of them demanded blood sacrifices. Could that be because they needed the blood to survive, because they were the fallen angels that left their first estate? I think there's a very good chance that that is true. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 20. But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils, and not to God. And I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. Deuteronomy chapter 32 verse 17. They sacrificed unto devils, not to God, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. These devils were the new gods that the people worshipped and made blood sacrifice to. Drinking the blood gave them a human body, and they were able to mate with human women and produce offspring, which were giants. The problem with having a human body is that you can be killed, and that's what ended up happening to them. In Psalms 82, verse 6 and 7, it says, I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. But ye shall die like men, and fall like one of the princes. So here the Bible is telling us that the gods, which were the fallen angels, the sons of God, or the children of the Most High that rebelled against God and fell, and then rebelled more by drinking blood and leaving their first estate to gain the human bodies to mate with human women, will die like men. So that was the gods of the ancient mythologies. Okay, the Bible here tells us that's who they were. These were the new gods, the ones that the people were making blood sacrifices to. That's the gods of Greek mythology. That's the gods of Roman mythology. That's all of these ancient gods that the people were doing blood sacrifices and human sacrifices to. The Bible here is telling us that that's who that is, that it's the angels that left their first estate to be with women. When these fallen angels reproduced with human women, the offspring was giants. We saw that in the verse before. That is because even though they had a human-like body, they still retained their angelic powers. These fallen angels didn't stop at human women. They also reproduced with all kinds of animals as well. This is where the different creatures of Greek mythology come from. So, for example, an angel mates with a particular species of bull, and that produces a minotaur. An angel reproduces with a certain breed of horse, and that produces a centaur. You know, an angel and a certain species of goat, a satyr. You get the idea. What would you say if I told you that this is the origin of a lot of the monsters that we have legends about today? As always, like I always do on this show, I'm going to try to prove it to you. So let's begin with one of everybody's favorites, the unicorn. Everybody knows the unicorn as this beautiful and magical creature of fairy tales. Little girls the world over will cuddle up with their little stuffed unicorns, and they have little tiny statues of the creatures on their dressers. We all just smile at the sight of their happy little faces. But what if the unicorn wasn't this sweet, innocent, make-believe creature? What if I was to tell you that the unicorn was actually a demon? Now, you would either be shocked, or maybe you would even call me a damn liar. So I want everybody that's listening right now to join me on this research. Okay, we're going to do something completely different here. You're going to become part of the show with me. I want you to pull up Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever search engine you like using. And I want you to type in Amdusias. It's AMDUSIAS. Once again, AMDUSIAS. Now, the unicorn is the true form of Amdusias, but he appears in human form when he is summoned. He is a great duke of hell. He governs over 29 legions of demons. As you can see, the unicorn is actually the true form of this particular Duke of Hell, which is a demon. So the unicorn is not this cute, beautiful, magical creature at all. It's a demon. Let's look at another example. This one is also a great Duke of Hell. I want everybody to get back on Google or whatever search engine you're using and type in Vepar, V-E-P-A-R. Once again, that is V-E-P-A-R. Now, Vepar rules 29 legions of demons, and her true form is a mermaid. She has the power to make the seas stormy and rough. She also has the power to make men die in 3 days by putrefying sores and wounds, and even causing worms to breed inside of those wounds. And that kind of makes you think of The Little Mermaid a little bit different, doesn't it? All of a sudden, your adorable little daughter snuggling with her Ariel doll while she sleeps is a little alarming. The truly alarming thing to me is that our society has turned demons into these cute, lovable creatures that almost all of our children love. There's little cartoon shows about them. They have toys, stuffed animals, coloring books. They're even on their clothing. They even dress up as these things on Halloween. There's a part of me that wonders if it was done on purpose. Now that might sound like a kind of crazy thing to say, but we have Hollywood and famous musicians that are openly worshiping Baal and Moloch. Okay, these are demons that require the sacrifice of babies of their followers. We know from insiders that have testified to the fact that child sacrifice and ritualistic abuse of children not only happens to appease these demons, but that it happens so often that they even have their own network set up to continue the flow of children to them for this very purpose. Now, I've said repeatedly on this show that evil absolutely exists. And there are things that go bump in the night. But not every monster is a werewolf or a vampire. Some monsters are very evil humans that do unspeakable things to the most vulnerable in our society. Those monsters are also very, very real. And those monsters walk among us. So I believe that the origin of the majority of monsters that we have today and monsters of legend goes back to that point in Genesis, where the angels left their first estate, took on human form to mate with women to produce giants. They also mated with animals, all kinds of different animals. And we know that not only from the Bible, but also from the book of Enoch. We also know that from Greek and Roman mythologies and old Sumerian text. They all tell us the same thing, that the ancient gods, which is what these things were, okay, the old Greek gods, the Roman gods, all these old gods were these angels that came down to earth to be with women and left their first estate. That's who the gods were. All of these old gods, in every one of these tales, they all had sex with any woman they chose. Some of them had sex with men as well. They had sex with animals, all kinds of different animals. It's throughout the legends, throughout the mythologies. That's where all these things came from. So every monster out there has its origin here. Whether you're talking werewolves, vampires, dogman, shifters, all these things have their origin there. I believe that's where fairies come from, leprechauns, all of it. Okay, now you have other creatures which some would consider monsters, which are cryptozoological creatures. I don't believe that they have the same origins as these other monsters. I believe that the supernatural creatures have an origin back in Genesis. Okay? When you're talking cryptozoological creatures, I believe that's a little bit different. Some good examples of that would be Sasquatch, Bigfoot, right? Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. Creatures like that. And there's many, many more. There's a bunch of different variations. You have the Abominable Snowman, you have the Yeti, you have the Orang Pendek, you have Champ from Lake Champlain. There's even a new one that was just sighted over in China, a new lake monster. All of these creatures I would consider cryptozoological creatures. I believe those are biological animals. They're not supernatural creatures. They are biological creatures that just haven't been discovered yet. So like the Orang Pendek, I did a show on that called The Real Hobbit that we did on Staring. That I believe to be Homo floresiensis, okay, which was an offshoot of man, very, very small. The Sasquatch, I believe that is Gigantopithecus, which is another relative of man from ancient times. I believe that's what the Sasquatch is. When you're talking Nessie, those kind of lake monsters, it could be a plesiosaur, it could be a bunch of different things. But I believe that that is also a biological animal. It is not a supernatural monster. Okay, they're called monsters by some people, but they don't fit in the same category as far as I'm concerned. That is just a normal animal. Some examples of animals that used to be in that category, but now are no longer in that category, are things like the silverback gorilla, the giant squid, the coelacanth. These things were supposedly make-believe. They did not exist. They were cryptozoological creatures. Science did not recognize their existence until they were found. And it was impossible to deny anymore because right there they are. You can just look at them. They're right there. It's not just a footprint or a picture anymore. We have the animal. It's right here. And scientists would say, okay, well, there it is. So I guess it does exist. There's been multiple examples of that through the years where science has said this creature does not exist. Everybody who thinks this creature exists is a Looney Tune, psycho, crazy person. And then, boom, here it is. Now we have it. And then scientists say, oh, well, yeah, I guess it does exist. We were wrong about that. No worries. But then the very next time you say, hey, there's this creature, we have footprints, we have hair samples, we have all this stuff, right away they go right back to calling you Looney Tune, crazy psycho boy or whatever. I never will quite understand that, why they don't learn the lesson. To think that it is impossible to discover a new animal is the epitome of stupidity, in my opinion. But some of these scientists, that's the way they act. Like, there's no way there could be a hidden animal that we don't know about. Impossible. I don't see where you get that. Every year we discover 10, 15,000 different species of insects alone in the Amazon. Damn near every year. But yet, somehow it's impossible. For it to be impossible, that would mean that we have literally looked at every single square inch of this planet. There's not a section of the planet anywhere that we haven't been and looked at. There's no possible way that any creature could survive without us knowing about it. That's ridiculous, man. That is absolutely ludicrous. Especially when you're talking about an animal like the giant squid or the megalodon shark. Those animals live in the ocean. We don't know barely anything about the ocean in all reality. There's so much of the ocean we've never even explored. I mean, when you're talking, especially down deep where something that large would stay most of the time, like the giant squid, we never get down that deep barely. But you always have these people that'll just laugh at you and say, oh, it doesn't exist. Until it does exist. But it's funny how those people that laugh at you, they never admit they're wrong and apologize for laughing at you, do they? They just start laughing you about something else. Kind of funny how that works. But anyway, what I was saying is the cryptozoological creatures, I do not consider those monsters. They do not have their origins in this same point where the angels came down and made it with animals to produce them. That's not where a lot of these cryptozoological creatures come from. They are just animals that have not yet been discovered by science. So I hope that clears that little part up. I wanted to make sure I got to that because that's something that I know I'm going to get questions on and comments on it when I put this on YouTube. I know people are going to talk about that down in the comments. So I wanted to mention that in the show, that I view these as two separate things. So I'm going to throw over to Old Boy and get his opinion on the research that I presented and see if he has anything to add.
And thank you, brother. And good evening, guys. I'm glad you are listening to our show right now. Back to what he was saying with the different demons being monsters, and I agree with that because there's other demons like that he didn't get into. There's Boone, Bane, Boone. It's spelled weird. It sounds like Bane, but it's Boone. It's the three-headed demon. It's a great duke, and he is the ruler of 30 other demons, like the most evil demons you can think of, and he's also necromancer. You know what bringing the dead back. That's his powers. But he's the Grand Duke in hell, too. Another one. And he's got 3 heads. He looks like a dragon. So remember the Hydra, the 3-headed, 7-headed monster, the snake. There you go. There's one right there. That's one he didn't say. That was one I was going to bring up. And, I don't know if you guys seen Jason the Argonauts, that movie. They fight, for the Golden Fleece. They fight the Hydra at the end. Well, there you go. Boone. One of the demons there. And that was one I was going to talk about. And, he's a pretty crazy looking demon. 3 heads. Because this thing, if you've seen pictures of it, it's pretty crazy looking. So, and another one is Bel, a.k.a. Beelzebub. The second to the devil. That's what they say Bel is. His general in hell, one of the grand princes, kings, whatever. And Bel's one of his forms, he can turn into a bull. So that would make sense with the Minotaur, or there was actually some people said that there was giant that had a bull's head with a human's body. So he also can turn into a frog, and they call him the Lord of the Flies. He's got a lot of names. Beelzebub, he's one of the 7 deadly sins, sloth. So that's who Beelzebub is. But he sometimes comes with a bull's head and a human's body. So, and he was talking about Bel worship, and they used to worship Bel. And if you remember in the 10 Commandments, they were worshiping a bull because Moses didn't come back. And you remember they were worshiping a bull, Bel worshiping. So, that makes sense too on that one. So they, that thing probably really existed. It was probably Bel. A lot of the Greek mythology gods were demons they were gods on earth. Like Apollo, some people say was Lucifer because he was beautiful. Apollo was a beautiful god. So that would make sense because Lucifer was supposed to be very beautiful in heaven. And that's where I think they got these different gods were, and they portrayed themselves something different. And like what James was saying, they mated with the women, and so they had these offbreeds of giants, and then these giants mated with themselves or animals, and they became abominations, and that was it. God took care of them in the flood, most of them. There's an argument about that though, with the Nephilim. But you had all these weird creatures running around, and people think that you got to realize, 5,000 years ago, if you seen a giant that was 10, 15 feet tall, and people got to realize is we weren't as tall as we are now. We were 5 feet tall, normal size, around there, 5.5 maybe, and we were very smaller, in stature. We weren't 7 feet tall. Maybe once in a great while that happened, but majority of people were 5.5 feet tall. So these things at 15 feet were giants, one way or another. They were just big because we were almost a foot smaller, and women were about 4'10", maybe 5 if they were lucky. So they even looked bigger. The weird thing is I was always wondering how these angels mated with females, and James, I guess that was one thing we needed to talk about. Is, as I was going to say, is if these angels mated with they ended up making these giants. How did these females survive? Because these things were they normal size? Maybe you can answer for me that in a little bit. Or were they just normal size when they were born, and then they just turned into these big giants? When they die, that was just one question I had. You can answer to me a little bit later after I'm done talking about this. But that was one thing I know that's probably has nothing to do with anything. But that would be really, if you're a regular 4.5 foot woman and you're going to have this giant Nephilim, how would you survive? Wouldn't it kill you? That's what I would think. That's just something I was thinking about while he was talking about that. And that has to do with all this. But if you're a human back then, of course you're going to pray to these things because they're 10 times bigger than you. They'll probably kill you if you didn't listen to them. And that's what always these probably what happened. The Greeks probably misinterpreted these things of being real gods like Zeus and Apollo and Hermes and Hera, and that's what these things really were. And it's crazy because, like he was talking about, they left their state in heaven. So that means they had nothing to do. We were talking about this earlier. That had nothing to do with Lucifer then, and fell. So they fell on their own. So and then he made these giant creatures like the Minotaur, and he was talking about the unicorn. It's a demon that I believe can change and make himself look beautiful, but really the reason why it portrays itself, because you can't really see what they really look like. You wouldn't be able to. It'd be so frightening. They're supposed to be you don't want to see the real form. You couldn't handle it. And this is what it portrays itself. Like that, and a mermaid. And like James says, a mermaid isn't like the Little Mermaid where she's coming out of the sea singing songs. It's something you don't want to mess with. It's a demon. And and it probably did do something with, like he was talking about animals. It could have probably mated with a whale or something. And that's why we get these giant creatures, because like he was saying, earlier about the megalodon. Well, I was thinking about it. If one of these creatures, this demon mated with something in the ocean, maybe it made the megalodon and made these dinosaurs. Because you were saying that all these are just regular creatures. That could be true, but you never know. Some of these creatures could have been made because them mating with this demon. Not all of them, not like whales and stuff like that, but like some of these giant sharks and plesiosaurs and all that, and plesiosaurs. Some of these could have been made because of that. And I think some of them were just creatures that were there, like he was talking about Bigfoot. That's cryptozoology. I don't believe that has anything to do with this. I don't think they were a mutation of a demon or anything. I think that was just from the giant Polyphicus. And I think it's a cousin, a long distance cousin, and they're just not as big as them. And some can. I don't know. I that's what I think. I don't think they have anything to do with being a demon or a monster or anything. And I don't consider Sasquatch monsters, because most people say they don't attack people unless they're provoked. Some do once in a great while, but I've never really heard a Sasquatch killing anybody. I think they want to just be left alone. They may be smart, and I think they are, because they can. I think they communicate in different ways, and I think they're smarter than we think. That's why we can't catch them all the time. But like werewolves and vampires, and we were actually talking about this. Maybe it's another show down the line. We're gonna do is, can a human become a demon? And we were like, at first no, but then we were thinking about it. Maybe these werewolves, or that whatever this thing was, a demon at first that changes people, can change somebody into one of these werewolves or a vampire or something, and this is how they keep their bloodline going, because James says they can be killed. They've still got their powers, but they can be killed. So they keep their bloodline going, and then they bite humans, and humans turn into these creatures, like vampires, werewolves, shapeshifters. Some of these creatures are real, though, and people got to start realizing not everybody made all this stuff up. Think about it. Back then, why would people lie? Because like right now, we all live in a modern day. People say that they see things, whatever. Even though that we some things are misinterpreted, how would you misinterpret a giant with an eagle's head or a bull's head that's 25 feet tall and has this? They even wrote this stuff on Egyptian walls and stuff like this, and Greek mythology. They have pictures of these things. Why would they make this up? They didn't just say all this, it was just a god. They probably saw some of this stuff. They believed it because some people saw some of these creatures running around. And these creatures were mean, like James said. They would drink blood. That's how they would survive. And what it looked like, they were doing everything with every kind of creature you can think of: snakes, cats, dogs, bulls, whatever. But you have these crazy mutations, like the Cyclops. People, and then some people said it was an elephant skull. I don't know, because how can you mistake an elephant for being a man with one eye? And it's supposedly they were giants, the Cyclops. Like, remember, they were like 17 feet tall. So it could be a mutation of a Nephilim, and that was what their mutation. It had one eye. And some of these Nephilims would mate with themselves, and they would have bad half breeds and stuff like that, and that's why God got rid of them. So it could have made anything, and these were abominations. If you have a lot of these abominations running around, all they're going to do is kill humans. They're not. We don't. If I was a giant, I'm not going to take orders from somebody I'm stronger than. So they put these humans in slavery, or they killed them, or they made them pray to them like they were gods, and they basically were in this time, and they were running everything. So that's why you see all these statues and all these weird creatures like the Sphinx. It's like a man's face with a lion's body, and or an eagle's face with a human body. That's what I think was going on at this time. These things were running around, and this is where monsters came from. And they're still monsters to this day, but we don't see them because they either learned throughout time how to hide, and we just don't, or they're doing something in the shadows. And I believe that. I believe there's people who know things that's going on, and they don't want to talk because they're getting forced or bought out to keep this stuff quiet. And I've always believed this. And people, that's where you get conspiracy theories. But these monsters were real. I believe this. Not maybe exaggerated from Hollywood, but sometimes you got to think about it. You didn't just make these creatures up in your head. Not one day I just saw, hey, there's a werewolf. These things have been talked about forever. So how did they make them up? That's what I wanted to know. I don't get when people said, oh, it's impossible for any of these things to exist. How is that? How is that when James is just saying there's things being found all the time? The giant squid, that thing, oh, that doesn't exist. Now they've seen it. The Megalodon, they have pictures of it now. That's probably exists now. It's still alive. It did exist. They thought it was extinct. It's probably not. So how would you say that it's impossible to exist? Monsters don't exist when so many people have seen it. Even if you had 10 million sightings and you took 90% of it, there's still 10%. That's a million that probably saw something. So that makes no sense. That's so ignorant. Like James was saying earlier, how do you think that way? Because you thought the giant silverback apes didn't exist, and the giant pandas didn't exist, and they did. The Komodo dragon wasn't supposed to exist, and it did. These things existed. Dinosaurs existed. They were giant monsters that ran Earth. They were basically monsters. They were stuff that you don't want now. Imagine a T-Rex running around here 30, 40 feet high, destroying everything in sight, eating you. Raptors are 7 feet tall that can think better than you can and would kill you. You don't want these things running around. That's why I don't get it, how they could think it doesn't exist when these creatures did. It's not impossible. And I really believe these things existed. And they still do. They're demons, or they're inbred from demons, whatever. They exist, or they existed. And not everything's fake and phony. I'm so sick of that. Just like the UFO things. I don't want to get out of this, but how can you say Earth is the only planet that has any kind of life form when there's trillions of planets on there? That's mathematically impossible. That's just, I'm not bringing that up to say anything, but it's just proving my point. There's something here or out there, and they're not friendly, and they were here before, and they're still here, and they will come back. It's written in the Bible. It's written in other texts. It's written in Sumerian texts. It's written in everything that these things are going to come back, and they will. And you better be ready for them, because it's not what you think. They're not coming here to give you hugs. You're not going to like what comes. I'm not saying all of them are bad, but majority of them are. But the one question I wanted to James, is how did they breed giants being, that's what I was going to ask you. How did that happen? Because when they die right after it?
The mother never survives when a Nephilim is born. First of all, the pregnancy does not last a normal 9 months. They develop extremely quickly. So they'll grow inside, and when they're born, they are bigger than a normal baby, but they are still a baby. Okay, but it's big enough to where it kills the mother when it's born. And you would think, well, how the hell does the baby survive if the mom's dead? Who takes care of the baby? Well, the baby, according to the lore, the baby develops extremely quickly to where within a matter of hours they're walking around and able to talk and everything like that. Now, how they learn the language, I really don't know. That's not mentioned in the lore, so I guess you have to use your imagination on that. But according to the lore, the children grow up very quickly. So literally within days, you have a teenager walking around instead of a baby. So that's how they're able to kind of fend for themselves, and they grow very, very rapidly. In the original versions of these giants that came from the fallen angels, they were gigantic. You know, by the time you get to Goliath, you're talking about a giant that's around 15 feet tall. But Goliath came from a line of giants, so he was not a full-blooded giant. Because the original giants, the original Nephilim, were between the angels and women. And that created the giant. And those things, depending on what you believe from the Book of Enoch or the Old Testament, they could have been anywhere from 50 to 75 feet tall, all the way up to 400 or 500 feet tall, depending on which translation that you believe is the right one. So these things were gigantic by the time they finally grew. And it's funny because we have stories in different mythologies of giants that large. So it all kind of matches up. But yeah, the mother never survived. But I want to go over real quick and break this down in layman's terms. Because in the beginning, I gave you a lot of the research, a lot of the biblical passages. And now I want to kind of just tie this all together so that you get a really good understanding of the process here. So what happens is you have these angels. Angels are spiritual beings. Okay, they do not have a physical form. They fall in love with human women. They want to go to earth and make love to them. These angels are watcher angels in heaven. Their job is to look after mankind. So they come down and they want to have a physical relationship with these women, but they cannot because they are spiritual beings. So in order to obtain a physical form that is capable of having a physical relationship with a human woman, they must do what's called leaving their first estate, that is drinking human blood. Through that process, they develop a physical body. That physical body enables them to have a physical relationship with a woman or anything else they choose. They still maintain their angelic powers. They are still angels, but now they have a physical form. The downside of having a physical form is that physical form can be killed. It can be destroyed. And that's what happened to these things, is eventually they were all killed off. But being a spiritual being, that part of the angelic presence is still there. Okay? So when that physical form is killed, that angel, the spirit, is still there. And that disembodied spirit wanders the earth looking for another body to possess. It becomes a demon. Okay? The same thing with the giants. They are spiritual beings. They have no soul. They have a physical form and a spirit, but they don't have a soul because they're abominations to God. So when they are killed, their spirits also wander the earth looking for a body to inhabit, to possess. They are also demons. So demons are the disembodied spirits of the fallen angels and the giants. Okay? We covered that in the show, What Are Demons and Where Do They Come From, in great, great detail. Now, as far as the monster thing goes, these angels not only mated with human women, but if you look at the Book of Enoch, if you look at the Bible, if you look at a lot of the ancient mythologies, they were having physical relationships with all manner of animals as well. The result of that union were what we call the alpha monsters. Okay? Now, this is the part I want to explain a little bit more because it can be confusing if I don't explain it to you. I'm not saying that every single werewolf ever made is made because an angel has sex with a certain wolf to form that werewolf. And every time a werewolf is formed, that's what has to occur. That's not what I'm saying. For each one of these monsters, you have an alpha. Okay? That alpha was created by one of these fallen angels that had taken human form, or a physical body, let's put it that way. One of these fallen angels that had taken a physical body, had a physical relationship, sexual relationship with an animal, That is what created that alpha monster. Okay, so let's take werewolves, for example. When that alpha werewolf is created, it can turn humans into werewolves. Okay, if you look at the lore, there's several different ways that can happen. Sometimes it's through a bite. There's also in the lore, it talks about how if you drink from the footprint of a werewolf during a full moon, you can become a werewolf. There's several different ways like that a person is supposed to be able to become a werewolf. But we know for sure that being bit is one way that can happen. It seems to me like it's some sort of transfer of bodily fluid, some sort of transfer of DNA that would cause that transformation to take place. So the alpha monster, no matter which monster you're talking about, is making more of its own kind out of human beings. Okay? The alpha will be way more powerful, just like the original giant was way more powerful than, say, Goliath. Okay? Because by the time Goliath came along, he was way down the line. Goliath was not created by an angel having a physical relationship with a human being. Goliath was created by a giant either mating with a human or mating with another giant. There was a whole race of giants at that time. A whole society of them. It was a lot. So as the generations go by, it becomes like, you remember, if you're old enough, the time of audio cassettes where you would go to the store and buy yourself a brand new cassette. And it was the greatest thing ever. You had this awesome new album. Well, your friend wouldn't have it, and your friend didn't have any money, so you would buzz them off a copy. You know, I had one of those boom boxes that had the dual cassette decks. You could put it in one and record it on another. Well, as you record it, the quality of the second one is not as good as the quality of the first. Well, if you make a copy of that copy, then you have a third generation cassette. It's kind of the same thing. Is the original alphas that were created by the angels are way more powerful than the carbon copies that are made by the alpha. They're not going to be as powerful as the original. And that's what we have here. So when the alphas die, their spirits become demons, much like the giant spirits become demons. Now the question is, what about all the other monsters? When they die, do their spirits become demons? I would think probably they become lesser demons of some sort because they do have that aspect of them. They are partially human, but they are also partially not anymore. So that would be an interesting question. We are going to do a show in the future on that. I'm going to do a hell of a lot of research and get you that answer. And when I have it, we will do a show on it, and I'll tell it to you. But that's the basic breakdown of how this whole thing works, so that everybody can get a good understanding of it. Because I know sometimes when I get into the research and I'm quoting the Bible or I'm quoting different old manuscripts and stuff like that, sometimes you just have to break it down and explain it in normal everyday terms so that everybody can understand. Because like me, I understand a lot of these old texts because I've read them hundreds of times in order to get an understanding of it. Does that make sense? Whereas all you've done is just heard me say it real quick, so I wanted to make sure I explained it. But that's the basic breakdown, and I don't know if that was the answer you were looking for your question, old boy.
Yeah, that was the question I was answering, because I was sitting here thinking about it. I'm like, how did they have these massive monsters without dying? And that's why I was asking, because I was thinking about it. I'm like, wow, like, how did they survive? I didn't know that. I figured they probably died. Or maybe they did something where they made them where they weren't able to die or something, but that means they didn't really want him as wife. They just wanted to make these. They just fell in love with human women, and then they turned these giant, whatever you want to call them, creatures, monsters, whatever. Everything basically mutated. And what you're saying is nothing is stronger than the original. So it's like a carbon copy, but it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. But that's weird because with humans, it's the opposite. Because we were originally worse than we are now, and now we're getting better and better. The more and more carbon copies we have as people, we become stronger. So that's kind of weird how you said that. Actually, I never thought about that. That was a good one you said, because they keep coming back and forth as something else, but it's not the same thing. And they keep, it's like with everything. They keep having these monsters, but they're not the alpha monsters. They're just a weaker version of it. So like Goliath was 10 feet tall, 10 feet 10, but his dad was supposed to be 14 feet, and then before him was 20, the 30, 50, and they got smaller over time. To I think maybe there might be Nephilim now. They're only 7 or 8 feet tall. That could be a possibility. I don't know, James. That's what I would think. Maybe that's what some of these giants are now only 7, 8 feet tall because they got smaller and smaller, and they barely have any of the Nephilim blood in them. Do you think there is still people who have Nephilim blood in them at all, or no?
Well, if you look at the most recent two that we have reports of, one was known as the Giant of Afghanistan. It was captured by our military in a cave in Afghanistan. It came out and attacked a squad of soldiers that were on patrol, and they fought it, and it actually killed some of the soldiers, but they managed to put it down, and they came and got it with a helicopter. A couple of the actual soldiers from that squad, plus the pilot of the helicopter that picked that giant up, have given interviews and talked about it. So that is a pretty reliable source, at least a very interesting one. The other one that we have did not come from an interview. It actually came from the riots that took place during that whole hands up, don't shoot thing that was going on here in the States. During one of the riots, they were showing news footage, and there was this store, and the rioters were trying to bust into the front of it and burn the place down. Well, you had a SWAT team that showed up. I assume it was a SWAT team. Maybe it was just police officers in riot gear. I'm not sure. But they pulled up in like a SWAT vehicle, and they got out, and they were on the side of the building. And they were going to go around to the front and stop these protesters. So they staged up there on the wall on the side. One of the officers was gigantic. I mean, if you know anything about police and SWAT teams, they usually range around the 6-foot mark, a little bit more, a little bit less. Okay, that's the general size of your normal SWAT kind of officer. They're the macho guys, the bigger guys, the stronger guys. This thing dwarfed all the other officers. It was twice as big as everybody else. So you're looking at probably anywhere from 10 to 15 feet tall. And I saw this on video myself, so I know this happened. And they ran around the front to confront the protesters, and they were out of the camera view, and you didn't see what happened after that point. But this guy was twice the size of everybody else. The one in Afghanistan, according to the interviews, was around 15 feet tall. So maybe we've reached a limit to how small they can get. Because if you look at the Goliath time, we're still in that same basic ballpark. It was in between 10 and 15 feet is what giants were at that point. And that's kind of where they are now as well, according to these two reports. So that's what I would say. But we're just about out of time. So, old boy, if you want to go ahead and give your shout-outs, brother.
Thank you, brother. And like I said, I'm glad we did a show. It's been in the making for like 8 or 9 months. We've been talking about it, and finally we got to do it. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Leave your comments down on the YouTube page. You guys will see it. Another thing is, I love you guys. Thank you. 1 year on Para X. I can't believe it. It's been great. Went fast. 34 countries now, guys. So or more. 35, something like that. But if you guys want to listen to our old shows, go to James Hershey Jr.'s YouTube page, subscribe. You can listen to all the new shows and old shows, whatever. Always check us out on Para X every Sunday at 9 p.m. Pacific and 12 Eastern. So technically Monday morning if you live in the East Coast. I want to thank you guys for following us. I love you guys. Remember to check out we do have a merchandise page. You guys can check that out. He'll tell you in a little bit where to go and what to look for, and whatever you guys want, shirts, whatever. You guys will find whatever. If you like the show, you'll find something you'll like there. And just remember, thank you guys to the bottom of my heart. In James's, we love you guys. We love doing this show. Especially this one. We've been talking about this one for a while. Next week we're going to do about the Wraith. And I had experiences with the Wraith in the last couple weeks doing ghost investigations. So I want you guys. This is going to be a good show coming up. So I hope you guys enjoy it. So, guys, have a great night. Blessed be. Good night, sugar ladies, misfits, and demon hunters. I love you. Stay safe, and come get lost with us. I love you. Good night.
The YouTube channel is youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. The merchandise store is teespring.com/stores/staring into the abyss. That's teespring.com/stores with an S on the end /staring into the abyss. That's their shirts, hoodies, totes, posters, all kinds of stuff there. I hope you guys learned something on this show, and I hope you enjoyed it. This is one, like Old Boy said, we've been trying to do for a long, long time. And I'm happy that we finally got it done. And I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope that it really answered some questions for you. Next week's show on the Wraith is going to be amazing as well. Because I'm going to go next week very, very deep into the lore. And I'm going to tell you things about the Wraith that most people do not know. Okay? This is not stuff that everybody can just tell you. So I hope you guys tune in for that. It's going to be a great show. Thank you so much for all your support and love. We appreciate you so much. And until we speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Bye-bye.